For over 60 years, there's one single event that has just haunted America. It's a case that on paper seems solved. We have a named killer, an official conclusion, and yet it's still what so many people call America's darkest and most enduring murder mystery. I mean, how is that even possible? After decades of investigations, literally millions of pages of documents, how can the assassination of a US president still be so full of questions, so full of doubt? Well, that's exactly the question we're going to try to unpack here. All right, so let's set the scene. Picture this. It's a sunny Friday in Dallas, Texas. The date is November 22nd, 1963. President John F. Kennedy is in town, trying to smooth things over politically and drum up some support for his re-election campaign. So it's noon. The presidential limousine makes a turn onto Elm Street. There's a huge crowd, like 200,000 people cheering, and then that sound is just shattered by the crack of a rifle. The first shot, it misses, but the second one hits Kennedy in the neck. And the third one is the fatal shot to the head. I mean, in just a few seconds, everything goes from a celebration to absolute chaos. 30 minutes later, the news is official. The president is dead. And to really get a handle on the shockwaves this sent across the entire world, we have to understand the man himself. So who was John F. Kennedy? What did he really represent to America at that moment in time? John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or JFK, was a true WW2 hero, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, and just this incredibly charismatic politician who shot up the ranks. Think about it. At just 43 years old, he becomes the youngest elected president in U.S. history. He was the face of a whole new generation, full of hope and energy for the country, and his inaugural address, it just completely captured the imagination of the nation. He launched something called the New Frontier, pushing for big changes in civil rights and healthcare. And of course, that unbelievably ambitious goal of landing a man on the moon before the decade was over. He was, for so many, a symbol of youthful optimism. But his presidency was smack in the middle of the intense pressures of the Cold War. I mean, he was facing down the Soviet Union, dealing with Fidel Castro's revolution in Cuba. And he had to navigate two of the most dangerous moments in modern history. First, there was the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, and then the nail-biting Cuban Missile Crisis, which seriously brought the world to the very brink of nuclear war. Now, these events, they won him a lot of admirers, but they also made him some very, very powerful enemies. Okay, so in those chaotic hours right after the assassination, the Dallas police started to zero in on one guy. He was an employee at the Texas School Book Depository. Yep, the exact building where the shots were fired from. His name? Lee Harvey Oswald. And Oswald's life, well, it was just a whole series of contradictions. He was a former U.S. Marine, but he had actually defected to the Soviet Union, only to come back to America a few years later. He called himself a Marxist, but he was working in a warehouse in Dallas. And here's the kicker. When the police did a roll call of all of the employees after the shooting, he was the only one missing. The police eventually found Oswald hiding out in a nearby movie theater, and during his interrogation, he was completely defiant. He famously told reporters, "I'm just a patsy." He denied absolutely everything, insisting he was being framed. But you know what? The world would never get to hear his side of the story in a courtroom.
And here's why. Just 2 days later, down in the basement of the Dallas police headquarters, something absolutely unbelievable happened. As officers were moving Oswald to a more secure jail, a local nightclub owner named Jack Ruby just steps out of this crowd of reporters and shoots Oswald, point blank. And it all happened on live television. The entire nation watched as the president's accused killer was murdered right before their eyes.
So, with the only suspect dead, the new president, Lyndon B. Johnson, he knew he had to give the country some answers, and he needed to do it fast. This is what led to the creation of an official investigation, one that was supposed to put all the doubts to rest for good. This official body, which was headed by the Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren, became known as the Warren Commission. And its mission was pretty simple on the surface: find out what really happened in Dallas. They spent almost a year on it, interviewing witnesses, looking at evidence, the whole shebang. And after sifting through absolutely everything, the commission's conclusion was, well, it was incredibly straightforward. They determined that one man, Lee Harvey Oswald, fired all the shots from the depository, and that another man, Jack Ruby, killed Oswald basically out of grief and anger. Simple as that. Case closed. Or was it? See, the Warren Commission's report was meant to be the final word, But for millions and millions of Americans, it just felt too simple, too neat. It just didn't add up. And this feeling fed into this growing distrust of the government, which created the perfect fertile ground for conspiracy theories that have only gotten stronger over the years.
All right, let's look at the first one, the CIA. One major theory goes that the agency felt totally betrayed by Kennedy after he refused to provide air cover during that failed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. They saw him as weak, as a liability in the Cold War. And then, years later, declassified documents revealed that the CIA actually knew Oswald had met with Soviet KGB agents, but they hid this from the Warren Commission. And that, as you can imagine, just deepened the suspicion.
Okay, another really popular theory points the finger at organized crime, the Mafia. They had lost an absolute fortune in their Cuban casinos and hotels when Fidel Castro took over. They were desperate to get Castro out, but then Kennedy's administration started leaning towards peace talks, which would have totally ruined their plans. So some people believe they actually partnered up with some disgruntled CIA agents to eliminate their common obstacle, JFK. But perhaps the most shocking theory of all implicates the one man who benefited the most from Kennedy's death, his very own vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson. Now, proponents of this theory point to LBJ's huge political ambition. He was right there in the motorcade, but was completely unharmed. And he was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One just 2 hours after Kennedy was pronounced dead, a move that a lot of people saw as disturbingly quick. And the mystery just gets deeper when you look at these enigmatic figures who were there that day. Like, who was the babushka lady? She was named for the headscarf she was wearing, and she's seen in photos and films capturing the whole assassination from a perfect vantage point. The FBI looked for her for years, but she and whatever films she shot have never been positively identified. What in the world did she record on that camera? And then you've got the umbrella man. Now get this. On a bright, sunny day, one man was seen opening a black umbrella right as the president's car was approaching. Was he just protesting something? Or, as some theorists claim, was he giving a visual signal to a team of gunmen? It just adds another bizarre layer of intrigue to an already confusing scene. So, here we are. Decades have passed, most of the witnesses have died, tons of documents have been released, and yet the central questions, they're still there. And the case file just keeps growing, becoming one of the largest in American history. Just to give you a sense of scale, the official investigation file on the JFK assassination contains over 600,000 pages of documents. 600,000! That's a literal mountain of information that instead of giving us clarity, has honestly just created more questions.
Now, in response to all this public pressure, Congress passed the JFK Records Act, which was supposed to force the government to declassify thousands of secret files. But even today, many of the documents that get released have heavy black lines through them. They're redacted, or they remain classified entirely, usually citing national security. The point is, we still don't have the full picture, not even close.
Which brings us right back to the ultimate question. The official story says it was a lone, disturbed individual, but the theories suggest a conspiracy that could reach the highest levels of power. With key evidence still locked away from the public, will we ever truly know who was responsible for America's darkest murder mystery?